this is Evanstar, and you're watching Introduction to Malifaux, Part 1. Malifaux is a miniatures tabletop skirmish game set on an alternate Earth where magic exists, and an alternate realm, which came to be known as Malifaux, was discovered, in which a substance called soulstones were discovered to untap the magical resources and magical powers of those who possess them. So what this did was this opened up a gold rush type scenario where various individuals from Earth were crossing over to Malifaux through a special train and an opening which is referred to as the Breach. Now in Malifaux, this gold rush scenario has created 6 different factions which are vying for control of Malifaux. And as a player in Malifaux, you control one of the 6 different factions, and within those factions you're going to select a crew led by a master, and that crew is going to be built and designed to achieve a particular strategy. So let's go over the factions individually, and we'll move on to the next portion afterwards. So first up we have the Guild, the sort of self-appointed lawmen of Malifaux, led by the Governor General. The Guild aims to control all soulstone production and trading in Malifaux, and basically they wish to rule the land under the guise that they are the arm of the law. And whether or not they are is a subject under much dispute. The Guild represents a mainly Western theme for most of their models. They're a highly combat-oriented faction, so they are more focused on things like combat, ranged attacks, and damage. And within the Guild, most of their masters are aimed towards countering some of the other factions. For example, Lady Justice here is widely regarded as the anti-resurrectionist master. So the Guild is a fairly straightforward style of play. They've got that really nice Western theme, and they really are geared towards combat. The downsides to the Guild might be that it is a straightforward style of play. They don't really regenerate or make a lot of new models the way some of these other factions would, and they tend to run kind of a lowish model count, although it can be argued that most of their strongest models are down at the 4 soulstone range. Up next we have the Resurrectionists, as represented by Seamus here in the middle of the screen. The Resurrectionists are, for the most part, a group of necromancers, grave robbers, basically folks that are willing to tamper with the magical fabric of living and death in order to try and build superior undead beings. So Resers are, they tend to be criminals, but some of them are operating within, under the guise of Guild employees, such as Dr. Douglas McMorning or Nicodem the Undertaker. Resers tend to feature a somewhat slower playstyle than the other factions. However, their main advantage has to do with recycling models, in that Resurrectionists typically take the bodies of the fallen models on the field, which become corpse counters in game, and they can turn those into other undead beings or undead constructs. Resurrectionists feature a somewhat slightly more complex mode of play than the Guild, but they tend not to do quite the amount of damage that Guild can do. But again, their main focus is really allowing things to die and building stronger things out of the things that do die. The Resurrectionists are a very fun playstyle, built for attrition, and they are there to kind of keep throwing the dead back at you. Up next we have the Arcanist faction, or the Arcanist faction, as represented by Rasputina the Ice Queen. Now the Arcanist faction is denoted by really just being sort of the free-range sorcerer types. These are the folks that want to be able to practice magic without the oppressive Guild trying to control their ability to use soul stones and practice magic as they will. This often leads to Arcanists being regarded as terrorists and thieves and smugglers to some, while to others the Arcanists represent the kind of leaders and heroes of a free rebellious people. So you have folks like Rasputina, who is a leader of a cult of people who worship the being known only as December. And you may have folks like Dr. Victor Ramos, who is the president of the Miners and Steamfitters Union. So Arcanists use their magical understandings and their powers to manipulate some of the things in Malifaux regarded as either terrorists or heroes. The Arcanist playstyle is difficult to define, except mostly that Arcanists tend to use a lot more spells than other crews will, and they're sort of built around either building constructs, slinging spells, or performing other types of soulstone manipulations or construct use on the field. The Arcanists can play very fast masters, very slow masters. They can use beasts, they can use constructs, they can use living models. So it's a very diverse faction with a wide that accommodates a wide variety of playstyles and is easy to learn on some of the crews and very difficult to learn on some of the other crews. And up next we have the Neverborn faction, represented here by Lilith. Now the Neverborn are regarded as the natural inhabitants of Malifaux. Not much is known about their original or their true origins other than these are the creatures that were encountered by the humans when they first crossed the breach and entered Malifaux. Neverborn creatures tend to be things of either nightmares or things of myth and legend, such as Lilith here, the mother of monsters. But you also have some other things that come directly from your dreams or your nightmares, such as Pandora, the Dreamer, Zoraida the Hag, and even Jacob Lynch. So the Neverborn playstyle tends to favor a very speedy playstyle. They are a little bit light on the wounds, so that once they do take hits, they are not going to stick around the field for very long, and this is a generalization about their playstyle. But in general, that is the Neverborn style. Very fast, can hit reasonably hard as well. Use a lot of willpower-based abilities, because a lot of things that the Neverborn do to the now human occupants of Malifaux is to terrorize them, kidnap people. They steal off into the night and perform their acts of terror that way. The fifth faction of Malifaux is known as the Outcast faction, represented here by the Victorias, or the Twin Masters. Now, the Outcasts are basically those remnants of the human society that is otherwise not accepted by that society. So anybody who falls outside the realm of the standard Malifaux society ends up being an outcast. That can be anything from mercenaries to rat catchers, to gremlins, and so forth. So the Outcasts tend to be a very unique faction in that their masters are almost a separate faction unto themselves. So you may have a mercenary style faction when you're playing mercenary style crew when you're playing Outcasts. You might end up with an entirely gremlin based crew when you're playing Outcasts. And that's what makes their playstyle very difficult to define. Other than most people who are playing Outcasts usually play one main master and they flesh out that master. And if they're a more experienced player, they might flesh out another master within Outcasts. But this is probably the most difficult faction to define because their playstyle tends to be all over the board. Everything from high combat masters like the Victorias here to manipulative, regenerative masters like Hamlin the Plague, to kind of almost comical gunline like Summer and the Gremlins. The sixth and the newest faction in Malifaux is known as the Ten Thunders faction, as represented by the Mistress of the Ten Thunders, Misaki, seen here. The Ten Thunders faction is the newest faction to cross over into Malifaux. Hot on the trail of their mistress Misaki, who came into Malifaux as a mercenary originally, but now has been ordered to expand the influence of her clan from the Three Kingdoms on Earth into Malifaux. And so what the Ten Thunders have done is they have infiltrated many of the other factions, and that gives them one of their unique features, which is the dual faction mechanic. Ten Thunders Masters can be played, with the exception of Misaki here actually, can be played either as a Ten Thunders Master or as one of the other faction masters. And that's a very unique playstyle because they end up with crossover models. As a faction, it's very difficult to identify anything other than the dual faction aspect as being their common uniter. You get a lot of glass cannon hard-hitting crews like Misaki, or you can end up with a highly customizable crew like McCabe, or a chi-focused resin recycle crew like Yanlo. So as you can see, playing Ten Thunders can actually give you a nice taste of all of the other factions that there are to play. And this is what makes Ten Thunders such an appealing faction, not only in that they're a new faction, but that collecting Ten Thunders actually does in some part allow you to collect all the different factions and play them at once. So that's it for these for the fluff and faction introduction of Malifaux. This is a character-driven game, so a lot of this is very fluff-driven, and most of its players are highly driven and influenced by the fluff. So, a character-based skirmish game, you have a ton of background with the masters and some of the minions in each crew. And so, that's it for fluff and faction. We'll now move on to basic mechanics and card manipulation as the next part of our intro.